We had such high hopes, and this week we found ourselves having to make the hardest decision. It's no secret that our dairy cow was the most impulsive pregnancy purchase I have ever made. When this babe was in my belly, I found myself desperate for calories. So we went out and bought a whole entire cow. You know, no biggie. She had been a nurse cow at her previous home, and with a dream of calf sharing, she was the perfect fit for two very green farmers. We're 3 years into owning her now, and every step of the way has been a fresh learning experience. So when she calved this fall, we had so much anticipation and hope for her calf.
She's so tiny. Oh, she's just shaking.
Good job, Goldie. I love you. What's your name?
Come on.
Good job, guys. Oh my gosh. Good job.
I think Goldie's pretty happy to see
In September, we had our very first calf, birthed here on the farm. How could this face be named anything but Pumpkin? I watched Goldie tend to this baby in the tenderest of ways. She would groom her, gently moo for her when out of eyeshot, and stand so patiently as she nursed. This heifer calf with perfect genetics on paper was A2A2, and in my mind, she was destined to become a fantastic dairy cow for some family. Or in the back of my mind, I thought maybe we could grow enough grass here so she could be a second milk cow for us. Just before Thanksgiving, we were planning to host our very first family holiday here on the farm. When our temperatures peaked and dipped 30 degrees once and then over again in just 5 days, Pumpkin got sick with pneumonia.
You okay? Is that breathing or what is that?
Our hands are on our cows daily, and even though we know that kind of weather makes for really vulnerable calves, we braced ourselves a few days later when we saw her labored breathing. If anything is going to go south with an animal, of course it's always going to happen on the weekend, making things much more complicated. So the next day was Sunday, and we woke and we milked Goldie out, but when Pumpkin got on, she wasn't her normal spunky self. Lethargic and slow to nurse, we hopped on as many holistic treatments as we could and kept them up around the clock until we could get to a vet. We drenched her, we pounded her ribs to loosen her lungs up, put pepper powder on her gums, and physically lifted her to get her body moving. Finally, we got to the vet Monday morning and gave her an antibiotic called Draxin, along with some other meds. And we held out hope despite the many DMs and texts from friends saying that once a calf contracts pneumonia, it's unlikely she'd bounce back. But bounce back she did. The very next day, romping like all baby animals do, we watched her nurse and zoom the zoomies, and with a new kind of softness to her, her skittish propensity subsided, and this baby was coming to us with curiosity for scratches and cuddles. In hindsight, I can look back now and see just how much of a job the antibiotics were doing. I must have had an inkling of an idea of what was to come because I pulled out the camera, and I rarely do that. I think I didn't want to miss anything that could be learned from this experience. Pumpkin was running on fumes, and the meds were the fuel in her tank. After a week, she required another dose, and we watched her breathing become labored again, and another week later, the same situation. Our vet was losing confidence that she would ever be okay. If only we could have expected an improved quality of life, we really would have kept this medication going. It's wrong to even call it a treatment because it only suppressed her symptoms. It gave us hope and the appearance of help, but truthfully, she never did recover. So the only thing to do was give her time and support.
Pumpkin is once again not doing well.
There's something about the life of this disease because, again, within a week, her symptoms were visible. Shortly after that, we would find her nightly off in the woods, disinterested in returning for evening meals or even to be with her mother, which was so unlike her. I watched her decline. I ached for her little body to do what it was made to do, for her to have energy and vigor, but days passed with no improvement. Finally, Bo and I confronted our fears and decided that when she would no longer eat, she was telling us that it was time. And that time came altogether too soon for my own heart. On her final morning, we went out into the woods to find her, and she painfully climbed to her feet and made her way to the water trough. Slowly, almost staggering, she drank and made her way back to the woods, and we gathered our gumption and our feelings, and together we accepted that this was the day that we had hoped to avoid. In my heart, I just hoped that we would find her one morning, still and silent among the yopon brush. But no one was coming to rescue us. This was the work of the farmer at hand, and we are the farmers. My stomach sank and my breath heaved slowly as we walked her to the back pasture where Bo had already used the tractor to dig a tiny grave for this little one. At this point, her body was barely bones. I'm sure she'd lost half her body weight in just a few days' time. And as if to say, here, now, she walked just half the distance and collapsed in the dappled shade by the fence line. We hugged and we thanked her for her life and joy and the hope that she brought to our farm. I watched her ribs rise and fall with such great effort and heard her breath pop with a sound distinct to her disease. In the very same moment that Bo pulled the trigger, like a light switch, she went from agony to peace. I didn't look away. Instead, I leaned into all that I was feeling. I cried for her. I cried for my farmer husband, and for the loss of life and the loss of the hope invested in her future. This is the week we learned about the life and death of dreams on our homestead. The next morning, the sun came up. The cow needed milking. All the animals needed feeding. And with broken hearts, we kept caring for them all.
We don't think about it. We just fall